Deep in the swamps of the Congo, locals say something impossible still walks. Not a legend from a museum. A living animal, seen again and again. Long neck, massive body. A creature the locals call Mokele-mbembe. The name means one who stops the flow of rivers. For over 200 years, explorers have heard the same story. A beast the size of an elephant, with the shape of a dinosaur. In 1980, an American scientist led an expedition into the swamp to find it. What he came back with changed nothing and convinced no one. Because dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago. Every single one. So how could tribes describe something that should not exist? Local hunters say it killed a hippo just for entering its territory. They call it sacred, forbidden, something you do not hunt. Scientists call it folklore, mixed with a misidentified elephant or rhino. But no expedition has ever fully mapped this swamp, not even today. So is Mokele-mbembe a lost dinosaur, a legend, or something we haven't named yet? Tell me what you think it really is in the comments below. In 1913, a German expedition leader wrote home about a creature no one in Berlin believed. He called it half elephant, half dragon, a beast still hiding somewhere in the Congo. That letter is real. It sits in an archive today, exactly as strange as it sounds. For over a century, hunters, missionaries, and scientists have all told a version of the same story. A creature the size of an elephant, with a neck like a dinosaur's, living in a swamp no map has ever fully covered. They call it Mokele-mbembe, the one who stops the flow of rivers. This is not a myth pulled from nowhere. It's a story with dates, names, and expeditions that actually happened. So today we're going past the headline, past the hype, and into the real history of the search for a dinosaur that refuses to stay extinct. The story doesn't start with a Western explorer. It starts with the people who have lived along the Congo's rivers for generations. Deep in the Republic of Congo, near a place called Lake Tele, communities have passed down the same warning for as long as anyone can remember. Don't go into the deepest parts of the swamp. Something lives there that you do not want to meet. The name Mokele-mbembe comes from the Lingala language, the one who stops the flow of rivers. Not because it's fast, but because of its sheer size. Elders describe an animal large enough to block a river channel just by standing in it. Reddish-brown or gray skin, a long, thick neck, a small head, and a body like nothing else in the region. Some accounts add a single claw on each foot. Others describe a low, growling call that carries across the water at night. For generations, this wasn't treated as folklore. It was treated as fact, the same way you'd warn a child about a real river current or a real crocodile. And that detail is part of why the story has survived so long. It isn't told like a legend, it's told like a warning. The kind of warning you only give about something you believe is actually out there, So when European explorers eventually arrived in this region, they didn't invent this creature. They stumbled into a story that was already centuries old. And what they wrote down next is where things get even stranger. The earliest written European account comes from 1776 from a French missionary named Abbé Liévin Bonaventure Proyart. He never saw the creature himself, but he recorded reports of enormous unidentified footprints found deep in the Congo interior. Footprints roughly 3 feet across, spaced too far apart to belong to any known animal at the time. That account sat in old mission records for over a century, mostly forgotten. Then, in 1909, a much more famous name entered the story. Carl Hagenbeck, the German animal trader who supplied zoos and circuses across Europe. In his memoir, Hagenbeck wrote that hunters in Central Africa had described an animal to him. Half elephant, half dragon was how he put it. A massive, plant-eating creature living in swamps, powerful enough that local hunters refused to go near it. Hagenbeck took the story seriously enough to fund an expedition to find it. That expedition never made it deep enough into the swamp to confirm anything. But the account spread, and for the first time, Mokele-mbembe reached a Western audience by something close to its real name. From there, the reports didn't stop. Missionaries, colonial officers, and the occasional scientist all filed similar accounts over the following decades. Different observers, different decades, describing an animal that on paper should not exist. By the middle of the 20th century, Mokele-mbembe wasn't just a local legend anymore. Strip away the differences in language and decade, and the descriptions line up in a way that's hard to dismiss. An animal roughly the size of an elephant, maybe larger. A long, flexible neck, often compared directly to a giraffe or to pictures of a sauropod dinosaur. A small head relative to the body. Smooth, not scaly, skin reddish-brown or slate gray. A long, thick tail. And critically, it's described as an herbivore. Witnesses consistently describe it feeding on a specific swamp plant, a type of liana with a large, apple-like fruit that grows along the riverbanks. That detail matters because it's oddly specific, not the kind of thing you'd expect from a vague campfire story. It's also described as aggressive only when threatened. Several accounts describe it attacking hippos and canoes that got too close, but never actively hunting people. Put together, this isn't a monster built from imagination. It's a specific, consistent animal profile, repeated by people who, in most cases, had never spoken to each other. Which is exactly what made 20th century scientists take a closer look. The most serious scientific search began in 1980. Dr. Roy McCall, a biochemist at the University of Chicago, organized an expedition into the Likwala swamp region specifically to investigate the legend. McCall wasn't a fringe figure. He'd already worked on cryptozoological questions with real academic credentials behind him. His team interviewed dozens of local witnesses independently, and the descriptions they gathered matched almost exactly the reports from a century earlier. They didn't find the animal, but they came back convinced something in that swamp deserved further investigation. So McCall returned in 1981, this time with researcher James Powell. That same year, a separate expedition led by engineer Herman Registers entered the region independently. Registers' team reported something remarkable. A large, unidentified shape moving through the water of Lake Tele, along with a deep, resonant call unlike any known animal in the area. They photographed the disturbance. The images were blurry, inconclusive, exactly the kind of evidence that convinces no skeptic and excites every believer. Then, in 1983, a Congolese biologist named Dr. Marcelin Agnana joined the story. Agnana claimed to have personally observed the creature at close range, in daylight, for several minutes. He described a reddish-brown animal with a long neck rising from the water of the lake. His camera reportedly malfunctioned during the sighting. So once again, there was a story, but no usable footage. Over the following 2 decades, more expeditions followed. Some organized by universities, others by independent researchers and cryptozoology groups. They used sonar, underwater cameras, extended stakeouts on the lake shore. None of them came back with a photograph clear enough to end the debate. But none of them came back with nothing either. Strange sounds, unexplained wakes in open water, trails through vegetation that local guides insisted no known animal could have made. Every expedition added a little more data. And every expedition ended the exact same way. Close, but never conclusive. And that pattern is exactly what's kept this story alive for over 40 years. Not proof, but not nothing either. So the obvious question is, why has no one ever come back with real evidence? Here's where we have to be honest about the science. Non-avian dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago after an asteroid impact wiped out roughly 75% of all species on Earth. That event is documented in the fossil record on every continent, including Africa. There is no confirmed dinosaur fossil anywhere in the world younger than that boundary. Not one. For Mokele-mbembe to be a surviving sauropod, an entire population would have had to persist, undetected, for 66 million years. And population biology makes that extraordinarily difficult to explain. Large animals need large breeding populations to survive long term. Usually hundreds of individuals at minimum, just to avoid extinction from inbreeding and random chance. A population that size leaves evidence. Bones, trackways, remains washing up on riverbanks. In 66 million years of a species existing, geologists would expect to find at least some physical trace somewhere. So far, nobody has. There's also the food web to consider. Sauropod dinosaurs were enormous animals that needed to eat enormous quantities of vegetation every single day. Supporting even a small breeding population would require a stable ecosystem large enough to feed them for tens of millions of years without interruption. And the Congo Basin, as it exists today, is a relatively young ecosystem. It hasn't looked the way it does now for anywhere close to that long. None of this makes the swamp any less real or any less unexplored. It just means that biologically, a literal surviving dinosaur is close to the least likely explanation on the table. Which raises the next question. If it's probably not a dinosaur, what are people actually seeing out there? The most common scientific explanation is misidentification. The Congo swamps are home to forest elephants, which are excellent swimmers. Often seen with just their backs, trunks, and the tops of their heads breaking the surface. From a distance in murky water, that silhouette can look startlingly unfamiliar. Add a startled hippopotamus, a large monitor lizard, or even a floating log caught in a current. And you have several ordinary animals that, combined with fear, poor visibility, and expectation, could produce a very convincing monster sighting. There's also a psychological piece to this. Once a community has an established story about a creature living in a specific place, ambiguous sights and sounds tend to get interpreted through that existing belief. It's not that witnesses are lying. It's that the brain is very good at fitting new, confusing information into a story it already has. That doesn't explain every single detail in every single account, but it explains a lot of them. And it's the theory most working scientists lean toward today. Here's the part that keeps this story from being fully closed, though. In 1938, a museum curator in South Africa was shown a strange fish pulled from a fishing trawler's net. It didn't match anything in any modern field guide. It turned out to be a coelacanth, a fish scientists were certain had gone extinct alongside the dinosaurs 66 million years earlier. An entire lineage thought completely gone, quietly surviving the whole time. In deep water, nobody had properly searched. That discovery is real, and it's one every skeptic has to sit with. It doesn't prove Mokele-mbembe is real, but it proves the fossil record isn't a perfect list of everything that's still alive. And the Congo Basin has its own history of surprises. In 1901, Western science formally documented the okapi for the first time. A relative of the giraffe striped like a zebra that local communities had known about for generations. Before that, most European scientists assumed it was just another piece of folklore. The Likwala swamp region is still one of the least explored ecosystems on Earth. Hundreds of square miles of flooded forest, much of it never systematically surveyed. So while a surviving dinosaur remains extremely unlikely and impossible are not the same word, especially in a place this unmapped. There's another layer to this story that's easy to miss if you only focus on is it real or not. For the communities who've told this story for generations, the truth of the creature was never really the point. The warning was telling people the deepest parts of the swamp are dangerous and forbidden. Keeps hunters, fishers, and children away from the most hazardous, hardest to navigate parts of the ecosystem. Whether or not a creature is physically there, the fear does real, practical work. It's the same pattern anthropologists find in guardian spirit stories all over the world. A sacred lake, a cursed forest, a river you don't swim in at night. The myth becomes a form of environmental protection passed down long before anyone used that phrase. That doesn't mean every witness was just repeating a moral lesson. Plenty of people genuinely believe they saw something real and describe it with real conviction. But it does mean the legend survives for more than one reason. Part biology, part memory, and part a very old, very effective way of keeping people safe. Which brings us to where the search stands today. Expeditions into the Likwala region haven't stopped. They've just gotten quieter. The area is remote, difficult to reach, and politically sensitive, which makes long-term, well-funded scientific surveys extremely hard to organize. More recent searches have used tools the 1980s teams never had. Camera traps left running for months at a time. Environmental DNA sampling, which can detect traces of an animal's genetic material in swamp water itself, and satellite imagery to map channels that have never been surveyed on foot. So far, none of it has produced anything close to definitive. No bones, no clear video, no DNA sample that doesn't match a known species. But no evidence yet is a very different claim than proven false. The Likwala swamps remain one of the last genuinely unmapped places on the planet. And every few years, a new report, a new blurry photo keeps the question open. Not because the science supports a surviving dinosaur, but because nobody has ever managed to fully rule it out either. So where does that leave us, honestly? Before this video, did you think Mokele-mbembe was a real, undiscovered animal, a total hoax, or something in between? Here's my honest take for what it's worth. I don't think there's a breeding population of sauropod dinosaurs hiding in the Congo. The biology just doesn't hold up. 66 million years is an almost unimaginable amount of time for any large species to go completely undetected. But I also don't think every single sighting is a misidentified elephant. The consistency across 2 centuries of accounts from people with no reason to coordinate their stories is genuinely hard to explain away completely. My best guess is that the truth sits somewhere in the overlap. A real, still undocumented animal in one of the last unexplored ecosystems on Earth. Wrapped in generations of folklore, fear, and a healthy amount of exaggeration. Not a dinosaur. But maybe not nothing either. Science has been wrong about impossible animals before. The coelacanth and the okapi both proved that in the 20th century alone. So do you think Mokele-mbembe is a real, unclassified species still waiting to be found? Folklore built around ordinary animals? Or something we genuinely don't have an answer for yet? Tell me your theory in the comments below, because whatever is or isn't moving through that swamp, the Likuala region remains one of the last places on Earth still capable of surprising us. And in a world this thoroughly mapped, this thoroughly photographed, that alone might be the most remarkable part of this whole story. If you made it this far, subscribe for more real mysteries science still can't fully close. And I'll see you in the next one.